Penguin Random House Audio presents The French Ingredient, Making a Life in Paris One Lesson at a Time, a memoir by Jane Bertch, read for you by Barrie Kreinik. To all the dreamers. Author's note. My years in France have taught me so many things, particularly to be sensitive to personal privacy. In France, there is an expression that people live by, pour vivre heureux, vivons cachés. To live happily, we live hidden. So I respect that my friends and colleagues like to keep their personal lives to themselves. Therefore, I have changed many names and altered some scenarios in this book. When it comes to the chefs at my school, I have had the enormous pleasure to work with so many extraordinary professionals who have made la cuisine possible. It would not be fair to include just one or two, so I have used characteristics from each chef to create composite characters. That said, I have conveyed the spirit and character of la cuisine Paris as I know it to be, and every word in this book is true to her. Prologue, 2010. It's impossible, I thought. It can't be done. I stood by myself in the classically Parisian courtyard, the high heels of my shoes sinking into the grooves between the cobblestones. In front of me stood the door to La Cuisine Paris, the cooking school I'd started just months before. To my right, the kitchen window belonging to the crusty concierge, whose damn cat I'd befriended even though I was allergic, all in a ploy to win her over. Above, the residences of those who insisted La Cuisine's presence was a nuisance, meaning we were a business that could emit smells and sounds. Hard to believe, since for most of our existence we'd had only a handful of customers. And right next to the school entrance, the home of the poor, sweet landlord who had rented the space to me, not realizing that since we were a commercial entity that was considered a nuisance, he really had no right to. It's not as if I hadn't been warned and hadn't already seen for myself what I'd gotten into. Paris was easy to fall in love with, but nothing else about it came easy at all. I was jealous of those people who seemed to flan around so effortlessly from art galleries to espresso dates. Paris was tough on me. The first response I would get when making any request, whether it was about returning a blouse or requesting a construction permit, was no. Paris is the kind of place that thrives on obstacles, and so do its people. The French also love conformity. When I first told people I was starting a cooking school, they said, "Oh, are you a chef then?" I was not. I worked in finance. Nor was I Parisian, nor was I independently wealthy or experienced in the world of entrepreneurship, let alone entrepreneurship in France. I was nothing. But when you are nothing, you realize that leaves you with the chance to be anything. And I'd had a feeling. I just knew there was a place for a school like mine that offered cooking classes for non-professionals. I thought I had a good sense for business. As the stars started to align, I recognized that I had a lot of friends who worked in the food world and found they were happy to help me get started. And I had, God, it sounds so Midwestern, but then again, so do I, gumption. It had worked. Not immediately, not for many anxious months. But then I'd begun to see it. The bookings were coming in faster than before. I watched guests in the kitchen connecting with one another, though they came from all the corners of the world. I saw them laughing one minute, then losing themselves in the cooking process the next, and I thought we'd finally broken through. We had a hit. But it had all gone wrong. All of that money poured into outfitting the kitchen, all those hours of work to establish our space, and poof, we would have to leave after less than a year. Sure, I could fight this legal ambiguity in court, but who was I kidding? I was realistic enough about French bureaucracy to know I'd be mired in it for years, and ultimately the court would side with the residents, not the business, not the nuisance. My paranoia had convinced me that they'd never side with the Américaine. So, what was there to do? I drew my jacket more closely around me and walked up and down the courtyard, occasionally looking up mournfully at the ivy framing our school window and the comfortable kitchen bustle transpiring on the other side. Our chef-teacher busily set out aprons and utensils at what would be the cooking stations for the afternoon's class, oblivious to the stressed-out American wearing down the cobblestones outside. "Go back to banking, Jane," the pragmatist in me advised. I was, after all, hemorrhaging money. Wouldn't it be nice to actually make some again? My pride was much bigger than my bank account concerns, though, and I had zero desire to go backward. Zero. "Go home, Jane," another voice said. But I hadn't lived in the States for more than 10 years. I worried that I didn't belong there anymore. What would I even be going back to? I'd left long before I had an adult life. Where would I live? What would I do? Plus, there was a bigger problem. I had started to feel at home in Paris. I didn't like admitting it, but I was entrapped by the damn place. On my walks to and from work, I was continuously inspired by the smells of fresh-baked bread or the sights of artfully designed storefronts and the layers of energy that came with so many people striding purposefully and fashionably to meet friends for an apéritif. The flower beds and stone sculptures of the Jardin du Luxembourg were just across the street from La Cuisine, for heaven's sake, and even as I paced, I could hear chatter from its visitors and someone playing a violin quite well just outside the park entrance. I had begun to see my life coming together in Paris, and I was even starting to love it. And what's more, I loved La Cuisine even as I sometimes hated it, a feeling I suspect business owners understand more than most. That exhausting, obsessive love for something that is close to an extra appendage. That thing that isn't always good for you or to you and frankly can slowly drive you crazy, but you never ever want to give up on. My company and I were forever entwined. Above all, I had no choice but to believe in La Cuisine, because putting my stubbornness aside, I still knew it was a good idea. A cooking school for everyday people who loved to cook, for those who didn't have months and years to improve their skills, who were in love with France and its food, who wanted more than a trip to the Louvre and the Eiffel Tower to remember Paris by. La Cuisine remained a great idea. I'd just fallen on some bad luck, but I could do this. Well, there's your answer then. There was nothing for it but to get up, dust myself off, and begin again. 1. And Paris laughed. 2006. If you are at a cafe in Paris and would like lemon with your tea, you say, "Pardonnez-moi, monsieur, puis-je avoir du citron avec mon thé?" I knew this on my first visit to Paris in 1993 because I'd taken a little French, and I had a trusty guidebook with a translation section in the back. But I knew very little else. I was almost 18 years old, and my mother took me on a week-long trip to Europe as a graduation gift. 3 days in London, 3 days in Paris. I'd never been out of the United States before, having spent most of my life comfortably ensconced in or near Chicago. At the opulent Café de la Paix, overlooking the Palais Garnier, Paris's famed opera house, my mom and I decided to rest our feet and order some tea. The café is an institution and was once frequented by the likes of Oscar Wilde, Émile Zola, and Marlene Dietrich. The two of us sat there trying to fit in, despite our white gym shoes practically illuminating our section of the restaurant. I requested the accompanying lemon in French, which I understood to be the respectful approach. I'll never forget the look on the waiter's face. I had certainly never seen a look like that in Illinois or Indiana. He narrowed his eyes and scrunched up his nose as if I had suddenly emitted a foul odor. Pure disgust. "Pardon?" he said, his tone derisive, accusing. I reddened, horrified and terribly embarrassed. I spent most of my 3 days in Paris feeling that same way. All I wanted to do at that age was blend in, feel accepted, but it seemed everything my mom or I said or did elicited a version of what I came to think of as the smell look. From trying to navigate the metro, to buying tickets at the Louvre, to ordering a meal in a restaurant, I had the keen sense that everyone was looking at us and that every move we made was just wrong. After the trip, people asked what I thought. How did I feel about international travel? About London? I couldn't even remember London. It was Paris that made an impression, and it was a...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?